The arrival of the peaceful threat, the Vaynar spire hung in the black like a jewel forged by gods. A massive ring-shaped station built by the oldest species in the galaxy. It orbited a quiet star far from any war zone, a place of law and order, where diplomacy replaced violence and words carried more weight than weapons. This was the seat of the Galactic Concord, where 12 advanced civilizations met to decide the fate of lesser species. They called themselves the Enlightened Ones. They had ended wars, they had uplifted worlds, they had erased hunger and pain from their own people. To them, humanity was a mystery, a young violent species from a backwater planet that had barely mastered interstellar flight. They had watched Earth for decades, seen its wars, its pollution, its chaos, and they had judged it harshly. So when Earth requested to send a diplomat, the Concord agreed, not because they respected humanity, but because they wanted to show control. Let the primitives send their representative. Let them see true civilization. The shuttle arrived at docking. Bay 9. Small, clumsy, and painted in faded blue and white, it looked like a toy compared to the sleek silver vessels of the Concord. No escort, no weapon signature, no energy shield. Just one human inside. The bay sealed and the air cycled. The ramp lowered slowly. A man stepped out. He was tall with dark skin, short black hair, and eyes that did not blink. He wore a simple gray suit, no badge, no weapon, no tech visible. His hands were empty. He walked forward at a steady pace, not too fast, not too slow. Behind him, a small case rolled on silent wheels. That was all. Security drones hovered. 8 armed guards from different species formed a line. Their armor gleamed, their weapons ready. The lead officer, a tall insect like Krell with 4 arms and cold yellow eyes, stepped forward. He scanned the human. Nothing. No hidden tech, no weapons, no implants. The human passed every check. The Creel officer frowned. This was not normal. All diplomats carried protection. Even the peaceful ones. The human stopped 3 steps away. He looked at the officer and said, "I come in peace." His voice was calm, not loud, not soft. But something in it made the air feel heavier. "I speak for Earth. I speak for my people. And I speak for those who have no voice in this hall." The officer hesitated. He had been trained for threats, screams, demands, not for quiet words spoken with such weight. Then the human added, "I come unarmed because my species has carried weapons for too long. We have burned our lands, drowned our cities, and killed our own for lies. Now we choose a different path. We send not a soldier, not a king, not a weapon. We send a voice. Because a voice cannot be silenced by force. Not if it speaks truth." The words echoed in the bay. The guards shifted. One of the drones tilted as if confused. The human did not move. He just stood there waiting. The officer ordered him to follow. They walked through wide halls lined with glowing symbols of peace. Aliens of all shapes watched from balconies and windows. Some laughed. A reptilian council aide whispered to another, "See, even their clothes are primitive." But others stayed silent. Something about the way the human walked, something in his eyes, made them uneasy. He was taken to a holding room before the council session. Plain walls, a chair, a table. Nothing else. Cameras watched every second. In the security center, analysts replayed his first words over and over. They checked for hidden signals, coded messages, subsonic triggers. Nothing. Just a man speaking. But the lead analyst, a Zarni female named Trell, noticed something. When the human said, "I come in peace," his pupils dilated, not from fear but from memory. As if those words had cost him something before. That night the cameras showed him standing by the window. The station lights dimmed. He looked out at the stars. Then he touched his wrist, and a small hologram appeared. It showed a city burning. Skyscrapers collapsing, smoke rising into a red sky. Children running. A woman screaming. The image was labeled Mars Colony Final Transmission. The human stared at it for 17 minutes, not crying, not moving. Just watching. Then he turned it off and lay down to sleep. In the morning, the High Watcher of the Concorde called an emergency meeting. "We underestimated him," one counselor said. "He carries no weapon, but his silence is loud." Another argued he is one man. What harm can he do? But the Watcher looked at the footage of the burning city and said, "This species has lived through endings. And when a being has seen the end and still walks forward, do not mistake calm for weakness. Triple the security. Monitor every word. And do not let him speak in the chamber unless we control the feed." But it was too late. The human had already spoken, and across the station workers, cleaner servants from species long silenced by the Concorde, had heard him. They remembered their own lost homes, their own forgotten wars. And for the first time in generations they felt something stir. Not hope, not yet, but the faint pulse of recognition. This man did not come to conquer. He came because he knew what it meant to lose everything. And that made him more dangerous than any fleet. The Council did not know it yet, but the first crack in their perfect order had already formed. And it began with a single unarmed man who spoke softly and carried the weight of a world that refused to die. The weight of human silence. The council chamber rose in tears like a great spiral shell built to impress and intimidate. 12 species sat in their designated arcs, each delegation draped in the colors of their world. The air hummed with translation fields and the soft pulse of data streams. This was where decisions were made, where the fate of planets could be sealed with a single vote. Today was the first formal session with the human diplomat. Elias Kane walked in alone, just as he had the day before. No guards, no entourage, no display of power. He took his place at the center circle, the speaking ground, and stood with his hands at his sides. The High Watcher opened the session with cold formality, welcoming the representative of Earth to the light of reason and order. Elias nodded but said nothing. Not yet. The first to speak was Counselor Vrax, a tall amphibious being from the water world of Scyther. His voice bubbled through a translator as he leaned forward. "Humanity has a history of violence," he said. "Wars over land, over belief, over resources. Your kind has destroyed ecosystems and fought over imaginary lines on maps. You have not earned your seat here. Why should the Concorde listen to you?" Elias waited. Then he said, "We do not come to argue our worth. We come to offer our voice. Because even the broken can speak truth. Even the guilty can warn others not to fall." A murmur ran through the chamber. Not anger. Not amusement. Something closer to discomfort. Another counselor, a metallic-skinned being from the machine clans of Tron, spoke next. "You claim peace, yet your planet still has weapons. You have warships. You train soldiers. How can you speak of peace when you still prepare for war?" Elias did not flinch. "We keep soldiers not because we love war, but because we remember it. We keep weapons not to conquer, but to remind ourselves what we must never use again. On Earth, we do not hide our past. We teach it to our children. We show them the bones in the soil, the names on the walls, the silence where cities once stood. We do not erase. We remember. And that is why we are here." The chamber fell quiet. Then the mocking began. The reptilian aide from before stood and sneered. "Your species has existed for only 200 years in space. We have stood in this hall for 10,000. What could you possibly teach us?" Elias turned to him. "You are right. We are young. We are reckless. We are flawed. But we have done one thing your great Concorde has not. We have stopped our own wars before they burned everything. We have chosen peace after seeing the end. And we are still learning how to keep it. Can you say the same?" The aide sat down. Number 1 spoke. After the session ended, Elias did not return to his room. He walked the lower levels of the station where the workers lived. The ones who cleaned the halls, who repaired the systems, who served the food. They were from species the Concorde called minor or neutral. Forgotten people. He sat on a bench in a quiet corridor and pulled out a small device. Not a weapon, not a tool, a recorder. He pressed play. A child's voice came out singing a lullaby. In a language no one in the galaxy knew. French, from old Earth. The song was soft and sad. A woman's voice joined in. His mother's voice. The recording was old, cracked, but real. A young Zarni girl stopped and listened. She did not understand the words, but she felt something. She sat beside him. After the song ended, she asked, "What is that dot of memory?" Elias said. "My mother sang that when the bombs fell on Paris. She sang it so I would not be afraid." The girl looked at him. "You lived through that." "I was 5, he said. "She died that night. But the song stayed." She did not cry. She just nodded. Then she walked away. But the next day she brought a friend. And the day after that more came. They did not speak much. They just listened. To songs. To stories. To voices from a world that had burned and still sang. Meanwhile, in the security center, Trell, the Zarni analyst, watched the footage. She had pulled Elias's file from Earth's open archives. Not classified, not hidden. Public record. He was not a politician. Not a general. He was a war journalist. For 30 years he had gone to every war zone on Earth and beyond. He had stood in trenches on Mars during the Titan uprising. He had walked through the ruins of New Shanghai after the Flood Wars. He had recorded the last words of soldiers and civilians alike. Not to shame, not to glorify, but to remember. One file stood out: the Mars Children incident. During the uprising, a group of 200 children were trapped in a collapsed shelter. The rebels refused to let them go. The Earth forces prepared to storm the base. Elias did the unthinkable. He walked into the war zone with nothing but a white flag and a recorder. He spoke to the rebel commander for 7 hours. Not with threats, not with lies, with stories. He told him about his mother, about the song, about what it meant to lose a child to war. In the end, the commander released the children. Elias led them out one by one. No shots fired. The file ended with a single line: "I do not believe in heroes. I believe in people who choose not to look away." Trell stared at the screen. Then she looked at the live feed of Elias sitting in the corridor with 3 alien children, now listening to another song. A lullaby from Nigeria. A voice singing in the dark. She turned to her superior. "Why did no one tell us who he really is?" "Is just a diplomat," the officer said. Words are not weapons, but Trell knew better. Words were the only weapons that could change minds, and Elias Kane was not just speaking. He was planting seeds in the hearts of the forgotten, in the silence, between the lies. And the Concord did not even see it happening. That night the council received a request from Elias: access to the Concord's historical archive, to study past peace treaties. The request was denied, but in the shadows of the station more workers gathered, more voices listened, more hearts remembered. The human had not raised his voice, he had not demanded. He had simply spoken. And the galaxy was beginning to hear. The archive that shouldn't exist. Morning sun of the outer rim star bled through the high crystal domes of the Vaynar spire, casting long golden shadows across the diplomatic halls. The station floated in silence, untouched by war or storm, a monument to order and control. But beneath its polished floors, in the forgotten corridors where air recyclers hummed and service bots rolled through dim light, something was shifting. Not a bomb, not a weapon, not a fleet. Just a man walking with steady steps and a request that should have been simple. Elias Kane stood before the archive gate, a massive vaulted entrance guarded by twin sentinels of the Nori race, tall beings with silver skin and eyes like frozen stars. "I am here for access," he said, "to the full historical record. Not just what is approved. Everything." The lead sentinel did not move. "The archives are restricted." Only council members and certified historians may enter. I am a historian, Elias said. Of conflict, of peace, of what happens when both fail. Earth has studied war for centuries. Now I study how others end them. You are not cleared, then clear me, Elias said, or deny me. But know this, I will not leave until I see what you hide. The sentinels exchanged a silent signal through their neural link. Such calm defiance was rare, not loud, not aggressive. Just absolute. They reported to the central chamber. The council debated. Some laughed. Let him look, they said. Our history is clean. We have nothing to fear from truth. Others were not so. Sure, the High Watcher remained silent. In the end, they granted access, but with conditions. He would be monitored at all times. No data could be copied. No files shared. And he would be escorted by a Concord observer at every moment. Elias accepted that he entered the archive, that it was not a room. It was a world. A vast spherical chamber with floating data orbs orbiting a central core. Each orb held the memory of a civilization. Wars, treaties, alliances, downfalls. The history of the galaxy spun in silent light. Elias walked forward. His escort, a young Zarni named Trell, followed close. She had volunteered for the duty, though no one knew why. She watched him not as a guard, but as someone waiting to see what would happen when a human touched the truth. Elias did not rush. He began with the oldest records. The great pacification of the Yen system. The Concord claimed it was a peaceful transition. A war-torn species welcomed into the fold. But when Elias pulled the raw footage, not the edited version, he saw something else. Cities burning, fleets descending, a population forced into compliance under the guise of aid. The word peace was spoken over screens. He moved to the next. The unification of the Krell Quadrant, another success story. Yet the files showed MASS relocations, cultural erasure, languages banned, temples dismantled, children taken from families and raised in Concord schools to forget their roots. Peace not through agreement, but through silence. Trell watched him. His face did not change. No anger, no shock. Just a deep stillness, as if he had seen this before. Because he had. On Earth, in every empire that ever called itself civilizer, he spent days in the archive. Not reading, studying, mapping, connecting. He requested files on species that no longer existed. The Veln, the Vora, the Vithari, all listed as extinct due to natural collapse. But the deeper he went, the more he found. Buried in military logs, in supply records, in the cold language of logistics, troop movements, resource extraction, population decline charts that matched no disease. He compiled them, not in a weapon, not in a threat, in a single data crystal small enough to fit in his palm. On the 5th day, he stood before the central core and spoke aloud. Not to Trell, not to the guards, to the archive itself. You do not erase a people by killing them. You erase them by making. The galaxy forget they ever lived, but I remember. Even if I am the only one. Trell heard it. And she did not report it. That night Elias returned to his quarters. He did not sleep. He opened a private channel to Earth, not for orders, for confirmation. A single message sent in encrypted burst light. Do we have the list? The reply came fast. We have it all. He closed the link. Then he placed the data crystal in a shielded case and waited. The next morning he did not go to the archive. He went to the central hall, a massive open space where delegates and workers gathered. A place of movement and sound. He stood on the lower platform where no diplomat was allowed to speak without permission. He raised his hand. Not in challenge, in invitation. All who wish to hear may come, he said. I speak not against you. I speak for those who cannot, people. Stopped. Workers from the lower decks. Servants from the maintenance zones. Even a few junior delegates. They gathered. Not in protest, In curiosity, in something deeper. He began to speak. He did not shout. He did not accuse. He told a story of a woman on old Earth named Amara. She lived in a village near the Sahara. When war came, she did not pick up a gun. She opened her home, fed soldiers from both sides, buried the dead with her own hands, sang to the wounded until her voice gave out. When the fighting ended, the leaders ignored her, but the people remembered. And peace lasted in that valley because of one woman who refused to hate. Then he told of the Mars children, of the rebel who let them go because someone spoke to him, like a human. Then he spoke of the Veln, a peaceful species from the outer belt, how they were erased, how their music was deleted from the archives, how their children were told they never existed. As he spoke, the hall grew full, hundreds, then thousands. The cameras recorded. The network carried his voice to every deck. The council was notified. They ordered him silenced. Guards moved in, but when they reached the hall, they stopped. The crowd was not angry. They were listening. And in that silence, something ancient stirred. Elias ended with 3 words. This must stop. Then he walked away. That night the Concorde cut his access. The archive was sealed. Trull was reassigned. But it was too late. The data crystal was already in motion, sent through a chain of trusted hands to workers, to refugees, to species who remembered their lost worlds. And then the signal came from the edge of the system. A single ship. Scarred, old, bearing no flag but the faded blue and white of Earth. It did not attack. It did not speak. It simply arrived and powered its broadcast array. Across the station, a new signal flooded the networks. Not words, voices, children laughing, a mother singing, a soldier whispering, "I am sorry." The sounds of a species that had bled and still chose to speak. Elias stood at his window and watched the ship on the view screen. The first move had been made. Not with fire. Not with force. With memory. And the galaxy would never be the same. The truth in a single file. The human warship hung at the edge of the system like a silent witness. No weapons powered, no hostile signals, no demands. It simply existed. In the void, a scarred vessel named Legacy by those who knew its history. Once a deep space explorer, it had been repurposed not for war, but for survival. Its hull bore the marks of asteroid storms and solar flares. It carried no army, only a crew of 12. And one directive. If the voice is silenced, the truth must still be heard. When Elias Kane was cut off from the network, when the Concorde sealed the archives and declared his speech an act of psychological aggression, the Legacy activated its primary system. Not a weapon, a broadcast array. A single pulse went out, not to the station alone, but to every civilian frequency, every data hub, every smuggled receiver in the sector. It carried no threat, no declaration, just a voice, Elias's voice. And a file. Inside the Venar Spire, panic spread quietly. Not through alarms, not through shouts, through whispers. Workers in the lower decks listened on hidden devices. Servants paused in hallways with earpieces in. Even some guards watched on private screens. The file was simple, 2 parts. No effects, no drama, just truth. The first was called Humanity's List, a record not of wars won or planets claimed, but of aid given, refuge offered, hands extended. It showed Earth taking in the last survivors of the Veln species after their world was destroyed, not as guests, as family. It showed human engineers rebuilding the floating cities of the Sither after a solar storm. No payment asked. It showed a human medical team walking into a quarantine zone on Tron Prime to treat a disease no one else would face. They called it compassion. The Concorde called it illogical. The second file was titled The Concorde's List. Elias had compiled it from buried logs, cross-referenced with refugee testimonies and supply manifests that did not match peacekeeping operations. It listed 37 species erased over the last 3 centuries. Not through war, through silence. One by one, their homeworlds were absorbed into Concord space under the banner of unity. Their leaders disappeared. Their histories rewritten. Their children taught that their ancestors were primitive tribes that vanished naturally. But the file showed the truth. Fleets arriving under false flags. Leaders poisoned. Archives burned. Entire cultures deleted like corrupted data. When the broadcast reached the council chamber, the High Watcher ordered it shut down. But it was already everywhere, on personal devices, on maintenance bots, on the screens of cleaning drones. The signal had been designed to jump networks to survive deletion. It was not a hack. It was a memory. Elias was taken that night. Not in violence, in silence. 3 security teams entered his quarters. He did not resist. He only said before they let him away, "You can lock me up, but you can't unhear the truth." He was placed in a detention cell deep in the station's core. No windows, no access to data. Monitored every second. The council declared the broadcast illegal, a psychological attack, a violation of galactic law. They demanded Earth recall the legacy and surrender Elias for trial. Earth did not reply. The ship remained. Still broadcasting. Still silent, but something else was happening. On Deck 9, a group of Veln descendants gathered in a storage room. They had grown up believing their people were a myth. Now they saw footage of their cities, heard their language. A young girl touched the screen and whispered this was real. We were real. On Deck 5, a Sither worker played the recording of human medic saving his grandfather during the Red Plague. He had never known who they were. Now he wept. In the lower maintenance tunnels, a network began to form, not of soldiers, not of rebels, of cooks, technicians, nurses, janitors, people from species the Concord had forgotten. They shared the file, copied it, hid it in maintenance logs, posted it on broken screens. The truth was spreading not like fire but like breath, slow, inevitable. Alive, Trell the Zarni analyst had been removed from duty. But she was not idle. She had seen Elias in the archive. She had heard his words in the hall. And she had not deleted the copy he had slipped her before his arrest. She accessed it in a forgotten terminal in the old data wing. She watched the Concord's list from start to finish. Then she did something no Concord citizen was supposed to do. She believed it. She found others. A former archivist from the Vora race who remembered stories from her grandmother. A mechanic whose parents had fled the Krell Quadrant. They met in secret. Not to plan war, to plan a trial. A public one. They would not fight with weapons. They would fight with memory. Meanwhile, Elias sat in his cell. He did not pace. He did not shout. He meditated, remembered, waited. The guards watched him through the glass. He looked calm. Too calm. One guard said he did not seem like a prisoner. He seemed like a man who knew something they did not. On the 3rd day, Trell managed to reach him, not in person. Through a broken ventilation comes line she rerouted. Elias, when they come for you, will you speak? He looked up. Not surprised. Always. Then make sure everyone hears. She did. The next morning the legacy changed its broadcast. Not voices. Images. A live feed of the station. And a message scrolling across every screen. The trial begins at dawn. The accused must answer. The council was furious. They traced the signal. Blocked it. But new ones appeared. From inside the station. From worker networks. From old systems no one monitored. The message spread. The trial was not official. It was not legal. But it was real. And when the lights rose on the next day, the central hall was full. Not with guards. Not with delegates, with people, hundreds of them. From every species, standing in silence, waiting. Elias was brought out. Not in chains, in dignity, He walked to the center, looked at the crowd, then at the empty council seats. He did not speak yet. He did not need to. The galaxy was listening, and for the first time in centuries, the powerful felt afraid not of weapons or war, but of being seen. The silence that screamed the central hall stood still like a frozen moment in time. Thousands had gathered from every level of the Vaynar Spire, workers from the deep decks, diplomats from minor systems, even a few guards, who had abandoned their posts not in rebellion, but in need to witness what was coming. The air was thick, not with anger, but with something deeper, a quiet hunger for truth. At the center stood Elias Kane, barefoot, now his gray suit torn at the shoulder from the struggle when they took him, but his back straight, his eyes clear. He did not speak. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood and let the silence speak for him. And the silence was loud. Above them, all the human worship legacy hung in the blackets, broadcast still pulsing through every open channel. But now, it was different. No words, no files, just sound. A loop of voices from Earth, a child laughing in a field on Mars, an old man whispering a prayer in a ruined cathedral, a soldier weeping as he held the body of his brother, not from hate but from loss, a woman singing in a language no one knew but everyone felt. These were not heroes. These were people, broken, scarred, alive, and the galaxy heard them not as a threat but as a mirror. In the council chamber, the 9 sat in stiff silence. They had ordered the feed cut. They had sent enforcers to shut down the transmitters. But the signal kept returning from hidden nodes, from maintenance bots, from old communication relays buried in the station's bones. Someone was feeding it, keeping it alive. Tro watched from a hidden access tunnel, her fingers moving across a stolen console. She had rerouted the broadcast through 37 backup systems. The Concord could kill one, but not all. Not when the truth had already taken root. Then Elias began to speak. He did not accuse. He did not shout. He told a story. He spoke of a woman named Lena from the city of Kiyu on Old Earth. When the war came, she did not flee. She stayed in the basement of a school and turned it into a shelter. She fed children from both sides. She buried the dead with her own hands. When a soldier from the enemy side collapsed at her door, she carried him inside. Her people called her a traitor, but she said, if we stop helping each other because of flags, then the war has already won. He spoke of a boy on Mars who lost his entire family in the Titan uprising. He survived by eating algae from broken domes. When peace came, he did not seek revenge. He became a teacher. He taught children from both sides to read, to build, to hope. Then he spoke of the Veln, a people of song and sky. Their world had been peaceful, no weapons, no armies. When the Concord fleets arrived, they opened their arms. They thought it was help, but the Concord called it integration. Within a year, their leaders were gone, their cities repurposed. Their children taught that their ancestors were primitive tribes who vanished. But one girl escaped. She carried a small device, a recording of her mother singing. That file had survived, and Elias played it. The voice rose through the hall, soft, high, and full of a love that had outlived genocide. People fell silent. Some dropped to their knees. A Sither worker wept openly. A Tron engineer removed his helmet, a sacred act among his kind, and bowed his head. This was not war. This was memory. And it was more powerful than any fleet. Then, Tro moved. She had spent the night gathering evidence not just from Elias's file, but from the station's own forgotten logs. She found supply records showing mass relocations, medical reports of forced sterilizations on occupied worlds, orders signed by the High Watcher himself. She compiled it all, not for revenge, for truth. And she did not send it to the Council. She sent it to every species that had ever lost someone to the Concord's peace. But she needed Elias free. That night she broke into the detention core using an old maintenance route only archivists knew. She reached his cell. The guards were distracted by a false alarm she had triggered on the other side. She opened the lock. Elias did not look surprised. "You knew I would come," he said. "I had to," he said. "You showed me what silence costs." They moved through the dark tunnels. Not running. Walking. They met others along the way, a Wellensinger, a Vora historian, a human medic who had been working on the station for years in secret. They did not carry weapons. They carried data, stories, proof. They reached the central broadcast hub, the heart of the station's network. Trell accessed the main console. Elias stood beside her. "One chance," he said. "Make it count." She activated the global channel. Every screen in the Vaynar spire lit up. Every speaker came alive. And there he was. Elias Kane, free, calm, speaking not to the council but to the galaxy. He did not begin with anger. He began with sorrow. "We are not here to destroy you," he said. "We are here to save you from yourselves. You built this Concord to end war. But you did it by erasing those you could not control. You called it peace, but peace without memory is not peace. It is prison." He showed them the files, the relocations, the silenced voices, the children taken. He did not hide Earth's sins. He spoke of its wars, its greed, its failures. But he said, "We do not erase, we remember. We teach our children what we did wrong so they do not repeat it." Can you say the same? The council tried to cut the feed. They sent enforcers. But when the troops reached the hub, they stopped. Some lowered their weapons. One removed his helmet. A young Krell soldier said, "I never knew. I was taught." They vanished. Elias looked into the camera. "If you believe in peace, then prove it. Not with force, not with silence, with truth. Let the trial begin. Let the lost be remembered. Let the galaxy speak." Then he stepped back. The screen went black. But the silence that followed was not empty. It was full of thought, of doubt, of awakening. And somewhere in the depths of the station, a single worker turned to another and said, "I remember my father's name." And that was the beginning of the end. Not of the Concord, but of the lie. The trial of the Concord. The station did not erupt in fire or violence. It awoke. Like a being trapped in a long dream, it blinked into awareness. The broadcast had ended, but its echo remained in every corridor and every mind that had heard it. Elias Kane was no longer a prisoner. He was a witness. And the galaxy was ready. For trial, not in a court, not under Concord law, but in the open, under light, under memory. The people had decided. By dawn, the central hall was full again. But this time it was different. No guards blocked the way. No enforcers stood in formation. The ones who had once held power now watched from the upper arcs, uncertain, silent. The lower levels, the service decks, the maintenance tunnels had risen. Workers, cooks, cleaners, engineers from species long silenced now filled the space. They did not come with weapons. They came with voices, with data crystals, with old recordings, with names. Names of parents, grandparents, entire peoples erased from history. They stood not as rebels, but as survivors. And they were ready to speak. Elias stood at the center. Trell stood beside him. Behind them, a simple platform had been built not of metal, but of salvaged wood from Earth. A gift once sent to the station and forgotten. On it rested a single object, a data rod glowing faint blue. The archive of the lost. Every file Elias had gathered, every testimony, every buried truth. It was not a weapon. It was a mirror. The trial began not with a judge, but with a child, a young Velm girl stepped forward, no older than 10. She wore a simple tunic and held a small music box. She did not speak at first. She opened the box. A soft melody played, the same one Elias had broadcast. Her grandmother's song. When the Concord took her world, she said, "They told us our people never mattered, that we were primitive. But this song proves we lived, that we loved, that we were real. I am real, The hall fell silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Then another stepped forward. A Vora man with deep lines on his face. His people had been erased from the Krell quadrant. He spoke slowly. My father was a teacher. He taught history. When the Concord came, they said he spread lies. They took him in the night. I never saw him again. But before he left, he whispered our true name to me. Vora Tith. I have carried it in silence for 60 years. Today I say it aloud. So my children can know who they are. One by one they came. A Sither medic who had treated refugees from Earth during the Mars famine. You helped us when no one else would. Now I stand for you. A Tron engineer who had found a hidden file in an old station drive. It listed his entire village as deceased due to disease. But he knew the truth. They were taken for re-education. None returned. A human nurse who had lived on the station for years under a false identity. I was not sent as a spy. I was sent to heal. But I saw what you do to the weak. And I stayed to remember. Each voice added to the weight. Not of anger, of truth, and the council could not stop it. They tried to declare the gathering illegal. But the network carried every word. The legacy broadcast it all to every ship, every colony, every world within range. The galaxy was watching. Then Elias stepped forward again. He did not shout. He did not point. He looked at the High Watcher and said, you built this Concord to end war, and you succeeded. But you replaced war with silence. You called it peace. But peace without justice is not peace. It is control. He turned to the crowd. We are not here to destroy you. We are here to save you from becoming what you claim to fight. The moment you erased a people to keep order, you became the enemy you swore to defeat. The High Watcher finally stood. His form towered over the chamber. His voice boomed through the translation fields. You speak of justice, but you bring chaos. You have incited rebellion. You will be held accountable. Elias did not flinch. Then let the trial be official. Let every species here speak. Let the evidence be shown. Let the galaxy decide. Or do you fear the truth more than disorder? A long silence followed. Then Trell stepped forward. She held a datapad. Not stolen, not hidden. Given to her by a Concord archivist who had spent his life burying files but now could not sleep. She activated it. A hologram rose. It showed the Concord's own internal report from 300 years ago. Operation Still Dawn. A plan to integrate resistant species through cultural dissolution. Not war, not violence, just slow erasure. Signed by the first High Watcher. The chamber trembled, not from sound. From realization. One by one, the council members looked at each other. Some lowered their heads. One wept. The Zarni counselors stood and said, I did not know. I was never told. And that was the moment the Concord cracked, not from force, not from war, from shame. Elias did not celebrate. He did not demand surrender. He said only, this is not the end. It is the beginning. Let us build a new Concord. One that remembers, one that listens, one that does not fear the past. The crowd did not cheer. They raised their hands, not in victory. In promise. And across the station on every screen, the face of a child from Earth appeared. A boy standing in a field of flowers on Mars. He looked into the camera and said, my name is Kale. My grandfather was a soldier. He fought in the Titan War. He told me to never hate. Because hate is easy. But peace takes courage. The broadcast looped. The trial had no verdict. Because the verdict was still being written. By every voice that spoke. By every name remembered. By every heart that chose to listen. And the silence that once ruled was gone. Forever. The unarmed victory. The Venar spire floated in the endless dark, unchanged in form, but transformed in spirit. The polished halls still gleamed, the data streams still pulsed, but the air was different, lighter, as if a weight long buried had finally been lifted. The council chamber stood open, no guards at the gates, no force fields, no silence. The trial of the Concord had ended not with a sentence but with a choice, and the galaxy had chosen memory over erasure, truth over control. The High Watcher had not been imprisoned. He had not been exiled. He had simply stepped down. Not in defeat, in recognition. The era of silence was over. Elias Kane stood once more at the center of the hall, not as a prisoner, not as an accuser, as a witness to what had been done and what could now be built. Around him stood beings from 100 species, not in ranks or delegations, but side by side. Workers, healers, teachers, children. They had no weapons, no armor, no fleets waiting in the void. But they carried something stronger: names, stories, songs, the proof that they had lived, that they mattered. The legacy still orbited the station. It had not fired a single shot. It had not sent a threat. It had only spoken. And in the end, that was enough. Its broadcast had not stopped. It now carried a new message, a living archive. Every testimony from the trial, every voice from the lost, every song from a people reborn. It was sent not as a weapon, but as a gift. To every world, every ship, every mind that would listen. The truth was no longer hidden. It was traveling. Elias did not speak at first. He looked at the crowd. At Trell, who stood near the front, her hands clasped tight. At the Veln girl who had played her grandmother's song. At the old Vora man who now wore his true name on a simple band around his arm. He saw not victory. He saw a beginning. Then he stepped forward. I did not come here to conquer, he said. I came because my people know what it means to stand at the edge of extinction. We have burned our world. We have turned on each other. We have built walls between nations and called them safety. But we also learned. We learned that peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of justice, of memory, of the courage to say I was wrong and still move forward. He paused. The hall held its breath. You are not evil, he said to the former council. You were afraid. Afraid of chaos. Afraid of war. So you built order on silence. But silence does not heal. It hides. And what is hidden always returns. We do not hate you. We pity you. Because you lived in a truth too fragile to survive a single honest voice. A murmur ran through the chamber. Not anger, not shame. Understanding. Then he offered a path. Let us build a new Concord. Not one that enforces peace, one that nurtures it. Let every species keep its name, its history, its pain. Let no child grow up not knowing who they are. Let the lost be remembered. Let the guilty speak. Let the healed lead. And let no one ever again erase a people to keep the peace. He did not demand. He invited. And one by one they rose. The Zarni counselor stood first. We will open the archives. All of them. No more hidden files. No more buried truth. The Sithar delegate said we will return the lands taken. Not as charity. As justice. The Tron engineer said we will rebuild the schools. Not to teach obedience. To teach memory. Even the Krell enforcer who had once guarded Elias in chains stepped forward. I was taught to obey. Now I choose to listen. The hall filled with voices, not in chaos, but in harmony. A new Concord was being born, not from power, but from humility. Not from force, but from forgiveness. When it was done, Elias turned to leave. Trell ran to him. Will you stay? He asked. You belong here now. He smiled. I belong to Earth, to the people who sent me not to fight but to speak. My work here is done, but yours is just beginning. She handed him a small device, a copy of the Archive of the Lost. Keep it, he said. Add to it. Let it never stop growing. As he walked to the shuttle bay, crowds formed along the corridors. Not to cheer, to thank, to touch his hand, to say their names aloud. A Vora child whispered Voratif. A Sithar woman said, my father would have cried to hear this. The High Watcher waited at the bay door, alone. No guards, no armor, just a being who had ruled for 100 years, now standing in the shadow of what he had done. "Why did you not fight us?" he asked. "You had the galaxy behind you. You could have taken control." Elias looked at him. "Because humanity's strength is not in ruling. It is in reminding. We came not to replace you, to wake you." And that was enough. The shuttle door opened. He stepped inside. As the Legacy turned toward home, it did not fire its weapons. It fired its lights. A pulse of white light flashed across the system. A signal, not of war, of peace, of memory, of hope. And across the galaxy, species who had long suffered in silence now looked up and said the same words. "We are still here." And the stars listened. The echo that outlived silence. The Legacy did not return to Earth in triumph. There were no parades, no banners, no speeches from leaders. It entered orbit quietly, like a traveler coming home after a long journey. When the crew stepped onto the soil of Earth, they did not speak of victory. They spoke of what they had seen, of names reborn, of songs returned, of a galaxy that had remembered how to listen. Elias walked through the fields, outside Geneva, where wildflowers grew over the ruins of an old war bunker. The wind carried the scent of rain and soil. A child ran past him, chasing a drone shaped like a bird. She laughed. She did not know his name. She did not know what he had done. And that was as it should be, because the greatest victories are not carved in stone. They are lived in silence, in peace, in the ordinary moments that only exist when war is truly over. Back on the Venar Spire, the new Concord began its work. Not with laws carved in metal, but with voices recorded in light. The archive of the lost became the archive of the living. Every species added their truth, their pain, their beauty. The High Watcher's seat remained empty, not because there was no leader, but because leadership was no longer a throne. It was a circle. Trell stood at the central platform every morning and played a new voice. A song from a world once erased. A poem from a refugee who had survived. A child's drawing of a home long gone but never forgotten. The station was no longer a symbol of control. It was a beacon, a library of survival, a monument to those who had been told they never existed and still said, "I am here." On distant worlds, the broadcast from the Legacy still played. In mining colonies on frozen moons. In floating cities above gas giants. In schools where teachers showed their students the face of a human who had come unarmed and changed everything. Not with fire, not with war, with words, with memory. With the courage to speak when silence was easier. And on Earth life went on. Farmers tilled the soil. Artists painted the stars. Scientists studied the sky not for weapons, but for answers. Children learned not only of Earth's wars, but of its healers, its peacemakers, its quiet heroes. Elias never gave another speech. He wrote one final message and sent it into the deep network. We are not better than anyone. We are simply a species that refuse to stop remembering. That is our gift. That is our burden. Carry it well. Years passed. Generations. Rose, the story of the human diplomat who spoke and made an empire tremble, was told not as legend, but as lesson. In classrooms, in homes, in quiet moments when someone chose truth over comfort, and when the last star of the Venar Spire finally dimmed in the far future, when the station crumbled into dust and the Concord evolved into something new, the signal still traveled through the dark, through time, through silence. A single loop of voices. A child laughing. A mother singing. A soldier saying, "I am sorry," and one calm voice that began it all. "I come in peace," and the galaxy never forgot. The end.